You are now tapped into the soft power frequency.
Welcome to Tapped In, everyone. This is season 3, episode 2 of Tapped In, the show about unraveling and the life that follows. Every week, Dr. Kiki and I are here sharing conversations about our journeys of ancestral reclamation, world building at the end of an empire, and our daily lives as two artists, doulas, mothers, and friends committed to co creating a legacy of love and liberation. My name is Siobhan Diores. I am a co founder of the Soft Power Collective. We are a virtual playground for creative care, collective care, and communal care, sharing things like Tapped In, like classes and gathering spaces, all rooted in sharing the soft power frequency of creativity and abundance and sovereignty. And so, with that said, I would love to welcome y'all to episode 2 of season 3. I am so excited to share that episode 1 is now available on Spotify. Dr. Kiki, our co-host this season, has edited and made it all beautiful and pleasurable for listening. And so you can now, if you're not listening live, you probably are listening to it as a podcast. But if you listen to the podcast, also know that you can come join us live. And with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Kiki to intro herself.
Hey folks, welcome back. It's so great to be here for a second week on a regular basis. I am really just coming here today with not a lot of opportunity to kind of catch my breath prior to this episode. So also just acknowledging that this is truly going to be our live show where we come as we are, and not that this isn't a priority for me to take a moment and ground, which I was able to do, but just having, a life full of balancing family responsibilities. Right now, I have a toddler at home, and that's a totally different experience than having a newborn baby. And so, really excited to just be here, ground with you, and share what's been going on in the last week. It feels like almost every week. Weeks don't feel like weeks anymore. They feel almost like months with how much changes from day to day. And so just acknowledging that there's a lot still going on in the world, a lot of feelings, emotions, and stories that have been activated in me since the last we talked. So thank you all for being here and joining us. I am calling in from my basement here on Peoria, Kickapoo lands in Illinois, central Illinois, and just proud to be part of the soft power community where we all get to show up and be ourselves. So thank you, Siobhan. Oh, I can't hear you right now, Siobhan. Siobhan, I can't hear you right now. Mm-mm. Doesn't look like you're muted. It looks like Siobhan's gonna go backstage and pop back on. So we'll just chill for a moment, and I just invite you at this point, wherever you're at, maybe this is the grounding that needs to happen. We'll just take a few collective breaths together. So wherever you're at, we're going to inhale in through the nose or in through the mouth, and exhaling together through the mouth as a clearing breath, and just sending any energy, any tension that you might have in the body out through the breath, inviting any supportive energies ancestors, spirit guides to be with us today, and praying for some support in the technical realms.
Am I back?
You're back. Okay, cool.
You know what I did? I tried to add the background music and then it totally cut my sound. And what I was saying was, Kiki, I couldn't hear the first part of what you shared.
Oh, no.
Did hear you start off around, just arriving, and what I'll say on that in case, I don't know if this is echoing what you said, but just really this show being a practice of allowing ourselves to arrive and just share from an embodied place, whatever that embodiment looks like today, which might be a little frantic, might be a little run around. I was running around a bit. We moved the show a little earlier. This last week, I think, was full of a lot of excitement and love. And it also is getting back into the swing of doing something like a weekly show. And so thank you to everyone who made it live to join us. We didn't really market it much, but that is just part of the process. And we are experimenting today with also not setting too many topics ahead of time and just allowing ourselves to meet ourselves and each other where we're at. And before I go any further, I guess I will give a longer bio from last week. I know last week we were so excited and we jumped into it, but for those who are new here, my name is Siobhan Diores. My background is as a full spectrum doula and a childbirth educator. I also am a neighborhood witch practicing mystic that provides spiritual care in the form of energy healing sessions and tarot readings. I am a co-founder of the Soft Power Collective. My role takes more of this, we call me the calm siren. And I am just so grateful to have this space to share with Dr. Kiki this season, because if you listened to last week, we gave a background on our kind of inception, our friendship inception story and where that has taken us in the past 3 years. And I was thinking this morning that as I was just kind of like letting my coffee and breakfast sit here, and before I would be kind of rushing around to do all these things, I was thinking like, wow, it actually is really lovely to just kind of be ourselves and let people in on the ways that we just have grown in relationship, which is a lot of back and forth voice noting, a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of can I vent and can I need someone to just like let this out to. And so that is kind of the grounding energy for this space. And I feel like we have all of y'all in our living room too. And I've been really, if you are connected with me on Threads, I've really been celebrating and highlighting I want to like counter these messages that virtual relationships are any less real, because this space I think really shows like what a vibe we can create together, we can share with others who participate live in the chat and with anybody who listens afterwards. So with that, I do want to take a moment I want to send it back to Kiki for the grounding practice, and those breaths were really, really supportive. And I also just want to name that today is day 220 of the escalation in Gaza, the genocide of Palestinian people by Israeli forces. And I want to acknowledge that and name that into our space today, because this show is going to be weekly. It's going to be, we've been saying like a morning show, news desk style. We're really inspired. Kiki by the morning show, TV show, me by those same kind of like news desk, SNL things where they throw stuff up. So that's kind of what you can look forward to in here. And we really want to root in the presence of what's going on in the world right now, because we're not separate. I really appreciated that last week's recording had so many like sirens and noises of the world around me, and I thought that was so disruptive. And again, when I listened back, was like, Wow, Kiki said that. Like, it's really a reminder that we are not separate from the world around us. And in a time where so many spiritual conversations, especially on social media, center on ascension and vibrating higher and leaving this dimension and exiting the matrix, we're here in the heart of the matrix, in the womb of the matrix. And that's what we're here for. We're here for this conversation, this energy. So thank you, Kiki, for being here with me.
Yes. And just to jump back to that intro, I am a part of the Soft Power Nucleus team known as Dr. Kiki. I am a sound healer and spiritual somatic practitioner with a background in music education and choral conducting, turned sound healer, witch, tarot reader, in my reclamation of my Filipino Celtic roots as a transracial adoptee. And so I have been sharing my story on Instagram for about the last 4 years. And that has followed my decolonization turned healing journey, because I believe it's all the same thing. Once you get into the political understanding of this world, it's, for me, it caused a lot of burnout. It caused a lot of dysregulation, and so it caused me to go inward and figure out how can I show up for these liberation movements in a sustainable way. And with my background in vocal music, I realized, wow, my voice has been my tool for music therapy, for creative release, an outlet for connection and community my entire life. And so how can I utilize this thing that has been in past years more academic into something that really fulfills my cup, and something I can share with others that's really accessible and doesn't require you to enter these quite colonial academic settings that can feel quite harmful to people of the majority. And so using the voice is the way I say it is our soul's unique frequency, and it's how we can access regulation the quickest by stimulating the vagus nerve through singing, humming, chanting, and using the voice. So for a brief grounding practice today, I just invite you again. We were in the process of taking some breaths as we were figuring out our audio. And so just taking a moment again to connect with the breath, inhaling through the nose, out through the mouth, releasing with sound, vibration, whatever feels like it needs to be released. If you'd like to move the body, doing any stretching, moving, I'm feeling some tension in my hips, so I'm starting to do some hip circles as I'm seated. I'm also sitting on a birthing ball, exercise ball. So creating some movement in the hips and the spine, the shoulders, the neck, continuing to breathe and release. And one of the ways that I really enjoy connecting with my voice is through what I call lip buzzes. And so that's using the voice and the air to create some buzzing and some vibration with the lips. And just that little bit of resistance that's created by bringing the lips together can help work through some of those energies, like frustration, rage, anger, without harming the voice, without using words, expletives, anything that might also cause harm to ourselves or the relationships that we're in. And so I use lip buzzing quite a bit, as I tend to use the voice a lot to release energy. So just exploring with the voice in whatever comfortable range is for you. There's no need to go too high or too low. And you might notice if you work with horses or other animals that kind of do that that is something that's really common you'll see. And so animals and other creatures around us, they're using their voices as well to release. So hope that practice supports you today and in the next days ahead. Back to you, Siobhan.
Back to you. I'm really loving our new test vibe. And I love doing the lip buzzes. I love the solution for not cussing people out, because that's really important. I personally really need tools for that, because it has been wild out there. I think really the way to kick off that I was sitting with was continuing our conversation of integrating the Hawaii trip and the conversation we began last week. As we already said, like, we're going to be integrating this for a very, very long time. And just wanted to open with that. Like, what, especially around Mother's Day, you and I had this conversation around, being back in our local lives. And I shared how I was feeling really depressed last week, honestly. I was really feeling a lot of heaviness in my energy. I think it was Friday, where I had gone to sleep with my son and slept maybe like 9 hours, 10 hours that night, and still was so sleepy throughout the day, which partially had to do with not drinking caffeine, but also as I sat at my altar on Saturday night, Sunday morning, the message the connection that I made was really feeling the grief of my Islander ancestors, the ones who were loving the island life, the ones who were resonating very deeply with the land in Hawaii and the ocean. And I was feeling their sadness. I was feeling the grief of just like the climate, um, and the comfort that so many of my ancestors and spirits feel, as well as the come down of living in the frequency of soft power, living with y'all, being together, being around people who really see me, being around people that I feel so safe to name my needs and to communicate directly with. That's something that I appreciate so much. And in time, I'm excited to share with folks more about what our team dynamic looks like behind the scenes, because it is full of really like a radical commitment to honesty, which is hard. And all of us coming from very varying levels of trauma and conditioning, socialization. I've really been missing that. And again, without trying to be so extreme, because my younger self, the thing that has always got me into trouble, call it ADHD, call it Sagittarius rising, it's to run, it's to go, it's to buy that ticket again. Like Kiki said, someone in her network was like, I'm renting my house for the month. And I was like, let's just go. And Kiki was like, pause, we're going to be able to go back. And I'm just like, just always ready to run. And motherhood, I think, was that thing that I needed in my life, to no longer like literally be able to run away from things. I think if I didn't have a child, who knows what I would be doing. But that has been what I was sitting with. And I did kind of a cord cutting. I did an elevation to any of those spirits that were like really surfacing, and lighting that candle, giving them offerings, sending them on their way. And it unloaded a lot off of my energy. And so I'm feeling a lot lighter now and a lot more present in my life locally here in San Francisco. And I just wanted to hear how that's been for you, knowing you have so many ancestors so tied to there. And now that we're, I think, 2.5 weeks out from returning back to the mainland, what's it been feeling like for you?
Ooh, I really resonate with the wanting to run, my Sag moon. That's how I always get myself out of a rut is let's go for a drive. Let's find that next flight to hop on. And again, it was motherhood and that commitment that I made to stay somewhere and root and create a foundation that is supportive to having a child and a family and wanting to really build something of significance and depth, have a depth and connection to my surroundings that I didn't have for my entire adult life because uh I was in a mode of just consuming my educational life and wanting to be free, which I think is a lot of that 20s decade that so many of us experience of wanting to see the world and get out there. And I honor that part of my life, but also now realizing that I need something a little bit more stable for not only my family, but my nervous system, which is also very connected to the needs of my family. And how much choosing this small town in central Illinois is very much part of that. And I think it's funny because I never would have chosen Taylorville, Illinois to root in. 10 years ago, even when I was with my partner, this is his hometown. And this was exactly the place I knew I wanted to be when I had that first connection with my daughter in the spiritual realm. And I knew this was where I wanted and was being called to. And I think that is really interesting because I pulled a card prior to our call again today. And it says, be magnetized. It's like it's a person, but there's a spiral around their face of light, and it's filled with a lot of orange and yellow and red, and so there's a lot of creative energy and rooting energy here. And I wasn't exactly sure what to take from that, but from reading the guidebook, it just says, how can you trust your intuition when you're being called to a project, a place, a relationship, even when your mind can't make sense of it? And it was that exact experience of connecting with my intuition, connecting more with my ancestors and spirits that led me to finding my place in Taylorville, Illinois, and bringing it back to how I've been integrating since Hawaii. It's been a really easeful transition overall, even though I still have a lot of grief about not being in the islands and not having that cultural um, warmth and acceptance and mirroring to me every single day these days. However, being in a season of falling in love again with why I chose this place to root my family and seeing the growth that's occurred over the last 3 years, because we were able to have a Mother's Day celebration this weekend at my dad's house. And we set up some tents. We camped out in the backyard. My dad did a fish fry on Sunday, and we invited not only our family, but all of the neighbors on our block. And all of the neighbors showed up. And it was just really cool. I haven't had that kind of experience. I don't even know in my entire life of inviting neighbors and them all showing and coming for at least a little bit. And it just showed me that this spirit of aloha that we talked about in our first episode is with us, and that it's not something that stays in Hawaii and is only accessed in Hawaii, but it's something that my dad has shared with me and is starting to integrate into me to a way where that's just my way of being and my way of thinking, that when we have a celebration that we invite more than just our immediate circle, that we're starting to expand and bring more of that community into our everyday life. And that feels really affirming to the work that we're doing, not just as soft power, where we are meeting with people virtually from all over the world, but then bringing that energy, rooting it, grounding it into our reality so that the local communities that we live in feel just as safe, warm, and welcoming as these relationships that we're building virtually and with other folks in Hawaii and elsewhere.
I absolutely loved hearing about your weekend of all your neighbors coming over and sitting with the ways I've lived in the same neighborhood majority of my life. This house that I'm in now is the house that my parents moved into when pregnant with me. And so I've had the same neighbors for a good chunk of my life. Obviously, it cycles around, seeing like different, batches of kids kind of grow up who like are out on the street a few years later. Now we got a new round of little ones. And still we don't have that same kind of culture, which I just realized is very ironic because my neighbor's Hawaiian. And that was a connection that I made while we were there. I was like, I forgot I grew up my entire life with Hawaiian neighbors. But as you were speaking, it reminded me of the day that we went to the polo match in Hawaii. So Kieran's brother is the announcer at the Hawaii Polo Club, and everything there was kind of like, everything we did was just, expectations versus reality. And prior to going to polo that day, I heard you share about his, vision and desire to decolonize the polo space. And so I was thinking we were going to see a bunch of like local kids and stuff out there playing polo, which I'm sure some were, but really it was this very wealthy white exclusive feeling culture, which I had never been around. Like, I know I have a white dad, but I really didn't grow up around white people like that. If they were like our local, like Irish, a lot of like Irish immigrants in my neighborhood that have been here a few generations. But anyways, what it made me think about while being there is similar to what you're saying about the spirit of aloha, and it's around cultural appropriation. But again, knowing I've shared a lot that my biggest takeaway and my biggest like call of attention on this trip was to neutralize things and to be less judgmental, less binary, less puritanical, I think, around the ways that I see things, and really observing and talking to some of these people who are the type of people I would never probably speak with in any other context outside of like serving them. Probably is the only time I think I've been around people like that, like working for them, serving them, things like that, cleaning their homes. Like, that is what I learned talking to them, was this desire and this gravitation toward things like the spirit of aloha, the things that they experience, and the welcoming culture of Hawaii, and this like subconscious longing of white folks who are so many generations disconnected from their culture. And so thinking about the ways that we talk about re-indigenizing, there are people indigenous to Europe, and those cultures like Irish gatherings are lively because I think Irish people have really fought to hold closer to their culture in comparison to others in Europe. And I don't know that much about Europe, so obviously when you're there that's different, but I'm talking about like the people here in the US, and just really seeing the ways that as simple as sharing food, sharing a meal is healing to people, whether they realize it or not. And really just witnessing, I just am curious about what that felt like, I think, for the neighbors to also be invited and to say yes to that invitation. And yeah, just feeling like that must have been so healing for the land that you're on, for the people, and just what a big impact you can have by doing something as simple as welcoming people over for a meal. And that was kind of a roundabout way of it, but it was really, really on my mind being there in Hawaii, the ways that some people travel to Hawaii, like, and make it their whole personality. And it's like, yes, it's so corny and extractive and annoying sometimes. And at the same time, it really shows this deep, deep desire for some kind of culture. And I think just coming to like cultural appropriation, that's what so many white folks are looking for. And that's why I can't recall who I heard say this the first time, but really just the idea that when you're disconnected from your own roots, you're more likely to steal, or when you're disconnected from your culture, you're more likely to steal from other people's culture. And how there is an innocence to it oftentimes because it's really rooted in that same wounds that we carry, just in less separation generation wise, that we have a closer memory, a closer access. And thinking about the cultural privilege of that in some ways, if we're talking about different layers of privilege, there is a privilege in our ability to see and experience our culture that a lot of white settlers that have been here for so many generations um, really have so few opportunities to reach.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Siobhan. I'm really so glad that you brought that into the conversation, because that's something that I have thought about a lot in my reconnection with my family of cultural appropriation and being a transracial adoptee, meaning that I was raised by white folks and very much in like that white Midwestern culture that um, has roots with their European descent to an extent, but my particular family didn't have a lot of direct traditions within it that you could trace back to Germany or England or more indigenous European cultures. And I think where I've come back to is similar to what our conversation was last week too, was yeah, there's always times that you could culturally appropriate by reclaiming traditions. And that's what's so important about that intuitive connection and really sitting with, am I being called to this culture and this tradition and this way of being? And checking in with yourself and your values and really trusting that answer. And if you're saying, no, actually, I'm not supposed to go here. We did that exercise in the care immersion last year where you led us to decide if we were being called to engage with Reiki. And many of us were brought to those gates of those questions, and many of us were told no. And that was just a really great exercise to go through as a group, because I realized, oh yeah, actually this is possible to question, to think about really deeply these different modalities of healing and be inspired by it. I've received Reiki so many times, and then also know that at this point, I'm not being called to be a provider of that service and of that and practice that modality. And and so I really appreciate you bringing that into the conversation, that a lot of folks that culturally appropriate are just wanting that connection to culture and feeling that rootedness in who they are, and it can just be so easy to extract from other cultures that are much more, I don't want to say just connected to, but really embodying their beliefs and their traditions, that it feels so accessible to others and so inviting to others. And so, yeah, to go back to this weekend and inviting the neighbors over, I can tell it made a big impact, even though it was a very little action to make, like knock on a door and invite someone over, because the day after, one of the neighbors brought my daughter over a couple stuffed animals that they had bought at the store because they said she had smiled at them for the very first time at our gathering, at our meal, and it made such an impact on them. And this is an older elder gentleman that lives alone, has no other family living in that house with them. And because my daughter smiled at him and she got to spend more quality time with them, he was really touched. And, it's just simple acts. Not that I would ever expect a material gift for something like that. That's so way above and beyond. But just that caused them to want to, share that generosity back to us was really sweet. And I think that's it. I think that's really the decolonization work. It's as simple as knocking on a door and inviting someone in for a meal, and they will do what they need to with that energy and that generosity, and hopefully that just spills out to another part of the community in other ways. And it just, again, helps us break down those walls that we are really taught in this world to hold up.
Becoming a mother, one of the most joyful things is seeing the ways that elders react to a presence of a baby. Also love that our little Sour Patch Kid is starting to smile and choose to smile at people, knowing she doesn't give those away. If she doesn't want to, and I love that about her. I think that takes us into the Mother's Day conversation too, that being a mother, that has been something really special. To see you just made me recall, when Reese was a toddler, I remember one day just being outside and just going to introduce ourselves to our neighbor across the street. And it was like the briefest interaction. And a week later, she rang the doorbell with a blanket that she had knit for him. So you're kind of pinging me that I want to go check on her. My neighbor Ruth, she's a Holocaust survivor, and she is very elder, and she knit this blanket, and she was just so overjoyed to do it, all because of a smile. And so you never know what will be currency for people. You never know what an energy exchange might feel really, just a smile, a meal, anything, like kind words. So thanks for sharing that. That kind of takes me into Mother's Day, because that was something else we had on our hearts. And one thing I actually appreciated was my Mother's Day was spent with my sisters. I have two sisters, and my mother and my auntie. It was a unintentional, no boys allowed day, except for Reese, who I just let have as much screen time so he would let us be peaceful. And he just built with his little blocks all day, and he loved it. But my younger sister, who was the only one of the five of us spending the day together, who does not have children, asked, what is your favorite thing about mothering this past year? So I wanted to ask you that question.
Ooh.
Favorite thing about being a mother this past year, or a mothering moment?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many moments. I think so. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, my daughter is with my mom, and that's allowed me to hold space for lessons and to connect with soft power. And it's those days when I pick her up after a long day of being at grandma's that I really truly love her reaction to me knocking on the door, and her running into my arms now, because I've seen her now in the last year go from not being able to walk to now literally running into my arms and throwing her arms around me. And it's just those simple interactions of, as someone who's reflected a lot on my relationship with my mothers, to know that it, as strained as sometimes they can be or have been in the past, there's nothing that can ever get in the way of the love that I have for my mom and both of my moms. And it's just really cute to see how she shows her love for me, and the bond that we've created in just 18 months of her being Earthside. and just what I look forward to in being able to watch her grow and develop and experience. Of course, taking her to Hawaii was a highlight, and to see her life really start in a way that's so grounded and connected to her culture that there's no doubt that she will feel Filipino. She will feel part of Hawaiian culture because of the involvement of my dad in her life, and just the welcoming openness that my siblings who live on Oahu have brought her into the family. What was your answer to your favorite mothering moment?
Like you said, there's so many, but the answer that I gave um, really has been watching my son have his own life and be his own person, and seeing him in other settings where it's not just the two of us, and being able to witness him, how he interacts with his classmates, his teachers. He started TK at the big kids school, so he's not, it's weird because you know everyone emphasizes the kindergarten, but this program is like at on site with the K through 5. So he's really been in school this year. This was the year he started school. And on Saturday night, the after school program held their annual musical, which Midori joined us for. The three of us went, and it was just so sweet to see, how he reacts when he sees his best friend out, and the things that they talk about, and seeing the two of them just sitting there and kind of chatting. And he has the sweetest bestie that I like. The cutest thing ever was his bestie's in Aries, and we're there, and Reese gets really overstimulated. They said at school assemblies he'll usually sit outside with the teacher. He wants to like wear headphones, and so when we got to the event, there was this whole like bake sale table, and he looked really overstimulated and just was standing there very quietly and was like, I'm good, I'm good. And of course, his friend, I was like, I'll buy you whatever you want, to his friend. His friend's like grabbing all these things, not shy at all about it. But then afterwards, he goes up to him and he goes, Reese, I got 2 Rice Krispies because I know you'll be hungry later. I know how you are. And then when he later left, he gave me it, and he was like, this is for him when he gets hungry. I know he'll be hungry soon. Um, and so just seeing those like relationships, and even just being a co-parent, um, not partnered with my co-parent anymore, and kind of seeing their life that they have together. It's been a process with mixed with like kind of a lot of self-awareness of my own urges to pull him back, to pull him closer to me, while also knowing that that's just an affirmation for me as a mom, that he trusts the world that he's in to be out, because he had some really, really rough transitions at his first couple schools. He does take a lot to adjust. So yeah, just getting to know him as his individual self, his own identity. He looks just like his dad, so I always joke with him, like, you look like your dad's name. And he really reemphasizes his sovereignty all the time. He's very clear to tell people when he doesn't like a nickname. He'll tell people, my name is this, like, and he'll introduce people saying, my name is this. And he said one day, you know why I always tell people my name when I meet them? So that they never get it wrong. And it's just something really sweet to see, especially seeing the spelling of my name, how much I still get uncomfortable sometimes when there's people I've known for a long time that pronounce it wrong, and I feel like I'm being rude by correcting them. So yeah, just seeing what a strong personality and what an individual he is such a treat. And one thing I didn't think about until you were sharing around your daughter's, the knowing that she's going to be so connected to her roots, has really been recently witnessing him make meaning of his culture, where he fits in. Um, it's a little complicated sometimes as a family that is multiracial, but perceived as white, fair skin. Um, and so I don't know. I think this is like, could be a whole other topic, but I just feel like just going into it, that he is really piecing his world, his understanding of race lately. And that's something that I was always prepared for. But I'm being really faced with the challenges of that in the world that we live in, because so many of the like resources around how to talk to your kids are rooted in a lot of times kids who aren't in diverse settings, kids who need it, who don't interact with people with other races. And so I don't really see, I'm in this weird kind of spot lately, and I'll just be really, really transparent for in case this resonates with anyone else listening. So the other day, he, in a very innocent and well-meaning way, said, "Hi, N-word," and he said the N-word with an A at the end. And I said, "What did you just say?" And he goes, "Hi," and he said it really sweetly. And I asked him where he learned that, and he said, "My friends say it in songs." And I really was faced for the first time in a long time. I don't get speechless much, but I've been really speechless on how to approach something like that. Because again, coming back to this like non-policing, non-binary way of thinking, um, I could see an initial reaction wanting to be like, "That's a bad word. You can't say that." Just like when he said the F word, when he said a lot of other words. But knowing like it's not a bad word. It's just a word you can't use. And how to explain that to a 5-year-old when I don't want him policing his friends saying it, because his friends are, that's up to their parents, but racially wise, they are allowed to speak how they speak. His cousins, and just knowing his world, he's really kind of noticing the differences of skin color, and we're really, it's hard to explain without almost introducing the concepts of prejudice to him that he doesn't quite have. So that's been, I wouldn't say that's the answer to my question, what's my favorite part, but that's been a part of mothering that's at the top of my heart lately, is just how do we, oh, in the chat, Nathan said, "The way you both empower your children is so important and beautiful." Thank you. And that is what I want to do, is empower him to think for himself, to be himself, to not say things are good or bad. You're like, obviously I said that is absolutely not allowed. You cannot use that word. And in general, our rule is that we don't use words if we don't know what they mean. That's where I start for the mostly. But yeah, just raising multiracial kids and kind of figuring it out how to explain things. And again, I think it brings me back to Hawaii in another way of just like seeing that, multiculturalism is so normal, and it's just like how do I talk about this without almost like introducing more prejudice than is necessary to be aware of, while knowing that he's really aware of a lot of issues in the world, in his own 5-year-old understanding. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but that has been my like mothering. That was quite a Mother's Day gift to hear him say that and be like, all right, this is the stage of mothering that we're at now.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's the thing. My daughter hasn't started speaking yet. So it's a totally different thing when they start piecing together sentences and using words that have such complicated, complex, nuanced meanings. And just celebrating you, witnessing the ways that you take that on with such grace and compassion, and that just the way that parenthood was so much a form of policing for so many generations, to be a conscious parent these days, a gentle parent, whatever you want to call it, is really challenging, because it's so easy to find other models of parenting that are just not that. And yeah, just celebrating you, because you're doing a great job from what I can see, and I just adore that little boy. So, really excited to see how he continues to grow and develop into himself, already being very clear with who he is, and that's a really incredible gift that you've given him. I'm getting emotional.
I know. I don't know what I was thinking taking down that route, because now we're just deep in the mother feels. I think that's something I would love to actually invite maybe a guest on who can speak more to that topic specifically. Because there's so much division in the world. There's so much, like, I think the word puritanical has been coming up a lot of like what we expect. And that has been my value. You know, I went to his teachers Monday morning and was like, look, this is a word that I heard this weekend. Just a heads up. This is how, and I asked how they would approach it. And they said the same thing, you know, like, we don't teach kids that's a bad word. Like, thank God he's at a very progressive school that honors culturally relevant things and kind of steers kids in the direction of, like, you know, what's school language and home language without teaching them things are bad. There's a segue. Cultural relevance. Cultural relevancy it's just one of those complicated things. And I think that's, again, we talked about this a little last week. That was like the responsibilities that we have in our bodies in this life, while understanding that things are so expansive and co-created in this paradigm. But what I wanted to touch on, because I was excited and I wanted your insight too, as we think about, well, let me back up. I last night had the privilege of speaking to a local university's nursing department, and Kiki joined and watched. And the invitation was to share as a doula about the role of cultural sensitivity and support, especially when it comes to reproductive and maternal healthcare and mental health care. And so that was really fun to, one, just be invited to share my perspective as a caregiver on cultural relevancy for Asian Americans specifically was the topic. And even afterwards, as I was reflecting, and even as you were giving your introduction about the academic space, that's another thing I've been sitting more with, of like this puritanical beliefs of what's the right way to infiltrate, the right way to disrupt and impact change. And you, coming out of the academic institutions, I know have so much to say about this. But what I was sitting with this morning was, what is the value of academia in a time like this, where we're witnessing student encampments for Gaza and solidarity with Gaza across the country, and varying responses from administrations. Even in San Francisco, we have 2 universities that have encampments, and the responses from the university has been very different for each one. Some are more supportive, others were very gaslighty. And so I just wanted to open that topic for you, of just like, what is the value of these institutions right now, and what are your just thoughts in general about these encampments as somebody who's worked for within the institution? Do you think it's going to have an impact?
Yeah. I have so much to say, and just want to again say that Siobhan did so well last night in showing up as Siobhan Diores, the doula, but also a representative of soft power and the soul sensitive care framework. It was so cool to see slides talking about what we do in our private containers out in a university class program of nurses, looking at what it looks like to expand upon trauma-informed care. So just had to put that out there. It was incredible to watch and witness. And I know so many people are taking notes. They better have been taking notes. But to go back to academia, I've struggled so much and have gone back and forth about my personal journey through academia, of feeling a lot of personal shame that was the route that I took, that I spent so much time, so much money in these programs. but really at this point being really solid in myself and my journey and why I've always been connected to my intuition and what felt right and where I was being called to, and knowing that had I not entered in those spaces, I don't know if I would have been exposed to the ideas that I have been politically, and committing to decolonization as much as I have, if it wasn't for the time, space, and inspiration that I was getting from the classes I was taking to go deeper into those topics, and specifically connecting that to the encampments. Those students are creating community with one another and are being exposed to what I've been seeing in a lot of places of community agreements that are way more based on care and humanity and the need for just showing up for one another in different ways than what they might be experiencing in the university. And so it really is, there's a lot of limitations that the university has because of the administrative the backlash that the administration would receive had they been pro-Palestine this entire time, because they are connected so much to our government and what is the workforce that we have in this country, and what they see their purpose being is creating that next generation of people in corporations and teachers in schools and nurses in hospitals, and making sure that that system remains supported and strong, while also at the same time seeing that the students going through that system are not connecting or aligned with those values, and that they're creating their own spaces and making their values really well known. And so, yes, I think there needs to be a lot of disruption and a lot of infiltration of those spaces, and also just knowing that had I not been in those classes and been exposed to people outside of my immediate family, I don't know if I would have such radical political views at this moment. And so that was the journey I had to take to be exposed to these ideas, to find my way to the movement, and just recognizing that might be somebody else's journey. So just trusting that spirit is working in those ways. And that doesn't mean that we can't be strategic in the ways that we make those connections and relationships with professors, programs, schools, universities, and just acknowledging that they exist, and have some value for some folks that are going through there. And that's why we exist, right? Just giving an alternative, and acknowledging that there's a lot of dysregulation that happens within the educational system in the United States. And so how can we support the next generation by providing these tools, these practices, and community outside of those institutions for folks to find refuge?
The doctor has spoken. I love, love, love hearing your insight on that. I'm really excited for what we have to learn from these students. It also was giving me a little like, wow, I'm really an auntie mom out here, because they're really tightly organized, and I'm like, I don't even have an in to get into to go over there. They're gonna have to really vet me. And I've been messaging with a couple at the school I graduated from, and it's a Catholic university, a Jesuit university, so it's what you could expect. But the thing that was so empty and ironic was seeing a conversation that was shared on social media between this president of the school and the student leaders, and them, saying like, let's like call it what it is. Like, can you call it a genocide? And he said, that's for the scholars to decide. And that was so ironic. Obviously, he's a priest, the priest president of the school, but for this whole school to be around being like Jesus and being out and doing the right thing, it's a very social justice driven school in some ways. Like you said, like, it totally depends on the classes you take, as far as what radical how radical you can go. But I read bell hooks and Paulo Freire for the first time in that school, this Catholic institution. I had a queer professor who was radicalizing all of us in that space. And then to hear the leader of that say, this is really for the scholars to decide, it was just like, the cognitive dissonance is just astounding. And as we were in that space last night, I actually got checked a little bit on my own biases, because you probably noticed that I changed the wording a little bit on that soul sensitive care description to be a little less spiritual. I still talked about animism, and that was one of my favorite inclusions was, when it comes to API, serving API folks, know that animism and ancestors are normalized for us. And I was really kind of giving that normalized historical kind of thing. But then seeing how the other presenters came in and were just very direct about these radical values, it was kind of this reminder to me that there are people who either don't care and are going to say what they need to say, and there are many, many students who are ready to receive the way, and who are so appreciative and who need that person to just come in and need, maybe they have a dry experience, but it's that one guest person that comes in, like you did while we were in Hawaii. When we were in Hawaii the first week, Kiki was invited to guest lecture for an online course as well. And that was really fun to be invited in with her as a part of Soft Power. And the class was on community music making. And so, yeah, just seeing the ways that certain people light up and get so excited at your presence and are so activated. That's why we do this. That's why our kuleana is to just show up and speak and be ourselves, because it doesn't have to be so big and major. So I'm digging deeper now for the next time I get invited in, of how I can shed more of my assumptions and be more boldly my radical self. Because I was a little nervous. I do have this little wound as as an outsider of institutions like that. And still knowing that I've been invited, I get asked to write letters of recommendation fairly regularly. And the first time was kind of like, me, who would want to hear from me? But now I'm I love it, knowing that I might be this little radical neighborhood witch, and even getting visible tattoos was part of my commitment that I'm never going back. I'm never going back somewhere where I can't have visible tattoos. That was literally part of the order from my ancestors. It was you need something that's going to make you unhireable, among other things. But yeah, it's just really cool to see how things are shifting at different levels and how people can make it impact whatever lane that they choose. And I think that's our soft power value in everything we do, all of our spaces. There's a lot of spiritual groups who are there to teach you how to leave your job and be a full-time spiritualist, and we're no, we need you. Spirituality is the baseline. You are divine wherever you go. You don't need to make it your full-time job, and in fact you probably shouldn't. For the most people shouldn't. Even I shouldn't. Yeah. Even I realized, I was yeah, there's other things that I'm here to do.
Exactly. That just like you said, is a baseline. Spirituality is a baseline. It's part of you. You are divine wherever you go. And, I think that's, again, relating to my kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, even still, teaching a community college course this semester on the history, music history. I felt a lot of shame just kind of holding on to that secure paycheck. And again, connecting that to Mother's Day and motherhood and creating what we need to feel safe is really just the call for everyone. And, hopefully I continue to connect to my values and to trust myself and to trust the ways that I'm being called from spirit to walk away from that at this point, so that I can be resourced in my energy and spirit to step in like we did in a virtual session or an in-person guest lecture again, because I still love connecting with students that are that age, and that kind of, seeking energy. That's what I see in a lot of students. They're just seeking answers. They're seeking support and mentorship. And I love being in relationship where I can acknowledge that and see that, and also show them what does it look like to be in a co-creative mentorship um, relationship that doesn't have that power dynamic that we usually see with teachers and students. Um, and that's what I love about where we're at now in our journeys of being those aunties, being those mothers, that we can show up in these ways and say, actually, I'm not actually going to be that teacher that you expected me to be. I'm just going to invite you into a practice, and it's up to you. You have agency here to opt into this or opt out of it. And I respect you as a divine being, regardless of your choice. And again, that academic space, I'm shedding more of those judgments of where people find themselves, because I also think, I'm no astrologer, but I also think there's part of that astrological pattern or cycle in each individual's journey of whether or not they have the capacity to be in those institutions. And so some people have more of a capacity to be in that environment. And I've just realized for myself that I've hit my capacity for being in that role as a full-time teacher, but still have the desire to teach and connect with those students that are in that traditional system, so that I can show them a different way of being, a different way of channeling that energy of wanting to create change and connect with other like-minded folks. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of different things, modalities that have supported me over the last few years of navigating that transition out, where I thought for a long time I was going to stay in that position. So it's really been such a ride, a roller coaster in that. And I can't wait to say more about this, because I know there's just more we could get into.
Yeah, and I always come back to quote the fairy goddess: we need you to be you wherever you're at, whatever it is you're feeling pulled toward. We just need you to be you. And that is what I told those students last night, which was our role is to hold the space for people to listen to themselves and to be trustworthy people that respect these sovereign decisions. And it's shedding so much. I think that that's one of the biggest things I want to disrupt in the social justice and liberation spaces, is replicating those kind of fascist and puritanical standards of being. We didn't go too deep into this, but there was a doula organization that a couple weeks ago took the birth worker world by not too much surprise, but by storm, by sending out an email that said we are transphobic. And it was them naming why they refuse to engage with what they see as a patriarchal infiltration of divine feminine, yada yada, whatever their thing was. And I have yet to roast them the way that I felt called initially. They've already had me blocked. When I went to go look at who it was, I was like, oh, they've had me blocked for a year at minimum. However, the key thing that was on my mind about it was, how can you say that you're about sovereignty when, even if, and I, to be clear, will not validate their stance on this, but even if you believe that people who birth outside the binary are crazy, mentally ill, whatever it is that these people like to say, is it not your job to serve people who are mentally ill? Is it not your job to show up for people you disagree with? Is that not what sovereignty is? That's the hardest part of being a doula, I think, over what I've learned. It's like, it's sitting there when you know that someone might be making, and of course, trusting yourselves to kind of like speak up if it's a hard one. It's a hard one as a doula. There have been multiple moments where I'm sitting in a birthing room hearing the provider say what they think, and that I think we're going to have to go in for a cesarean now, and my client just resigning to that immediately, and me feeling like such a failure, me internalizing all of that. And that is what shaped one, bring it back to my power, was one, I have to my role that I signed on that contract was to respect their sovereign decision making. And if I think that they're making an informed decision, where do I need to take more responsibility for my role as a doula? And that's why I like working with people sooner now. I like working with people more long term, because I'm like, hold on, the whole culture here needs to change, because a few sessions, a few hour meetings leading up to that is not going to help you when that time comes. And just, yeah, coming back to like, as space holders, if you say you're about sovereignty, you got to be about sovereignty. You got to be for the people you disagree with. You got to think about what to do with the people who've committed crimes that may trigger your own personal history. And the real question comes down to, are you about sovereignty and liberation, or are you not? Because you either are or you aren't when it comes down to that. And there's always the option to disengage and keep yourself safe and keep the community safe if that's what you feel. But it's just we're not out here replicating another flavor of fascism. This is where I want to leave that.
And that comes from Siobhan Diores at Soft Power. And our closing remarks are just that.
Yeah, that is my last remark. I actually wanted to pull a card for everyone here today from my big Ghibli Major Arcana deck.
Ooh,
That's
yay.
really beautiful. I just felt called to grab that on the way out. And so, message, this one, yes. There we go. The Hanged Man. I actually don't know what movie this one is from. If anybody knows, throw it in the chat.
Cool.
Yeah, and the message here for this context today is really echoing what we've already said, is when you find yourself judging, that kind of old phrase, it's like when you point a finger, 3 are pointing back at you. There's truth to that. And not in a way of allowing things to occur in your presence that are wrong. Decide for yourself when it's time to speak out, but also catch yourself when you're just being judgmental without any productive reflection. And the way that I've been moving the last few years intentionally, as someone who comes from a highly judgmental, shit talking family, is when I find myself slipping into judgment, what can I, if everyone's a mirror, what does it say about me? What can I learn from that? What can I constructively reflect back to myself about my observations in others, people who are privileged and stealing cultures? How am I doing those things? Because there's ways that I do. Or what then, if I'm not doing those things, what then can I be grateful for in myself and highlight in myself and bring more power back to myself? This is about having a different perspective and being willing to open to a different perspective and trusting your path. Like you said, it takes baby steps to get to where we're at. When I look back to try and track my journey, it's been very difficult because it's hard to see what those small choices were every day, but all of it leads up to where we are now. I reflected on that yesterday on Threads, that early 2021, I started the year before I had really much of a psychic gift practice. I still was intuitive in some ways, but I had this urge to host a call on Clubhouse, if you remember that throwback of an app, where I called it Monday Manifesting. I didn't know shit about manifesting. I know a lot more now about the mechanics of it, and I would probably roll my eyes at like the language that I used back then. But it was where I was at that moment. What I needed as a mom of a 1-year-old was to throw this random call on Clubhouse. People started coming regularly. I was there at 7 a.m. on a Monday. I don't even wake up at 7 a.m. anymore unless I just don't, unless my child wakes me up. But trusting, I was working full time at that time. I had a 1-year-old at that time. I was struggling through what I know now was the end of my marriage. I didn't know it yet at the time. I was still trying. And yet I got this little urge that was like, find some time to do something for you. Find some time to gather some people. And that 7 a.m. call where people just showed up to say, this is what I am calling in for myself this week. This is my intention for this week. These are my words that are kind of like I'm trying to embody the vibe of this week. And then having the same kind of call yesterday with the soft power team and being like, oh, that was the one step that I had to take. And I totally forgot about that step. It's these tiny little things that posture to the universe that we're ready and we're open to something different. And that's when we allow these new things in different ways to become our reality. Like we say in soft power frequencies, like you can come to a YouTube live, you can come to a Zoom gathering and microdose this world that you want to be in. And over time, with intention, with commitment, with courage and a willingness to be open, you could be traveling Hawaii with these same people, meeting families, and having your children have new aunties and really materially change your world. And so that's our story here. That is what our journey has been in just 3 years. It's actually incredible to think about the differences how we've materially impacted our lives by doing something as simple as hopping on Zoom calls regularly and being committed and delusional enough to not stop.
Like I saw on Instagram by Woke Kindergarten, radical liberation requires delusion because we have to literally believe that liberation is possible, and to continue to commit to that does require some delusion, and I'm here for that kind of delusion. So thankful so much for the soft power frequency to keep me grounded in that creative softness that we can continue to tap into when the world is showing us so many examples of the opposite.
All right. Well, I think that's a perfect closer for this week. Thank you, everyone who's joined live. If you are not already, subscribe to our channel, follow us on YouTube, on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. If you don't think it's 5 stars, forget I said it and stay off our account. And sign up for our Substack. We are really working behind the scenes. This is our, again, responsibility that we've been called to share our voices and stories weekly between Kiki and I, but the rest of the team is working to commit to taking this vision to the next big step that we've been called to. So subscribe at withsoftpower.substack.com and connect with us on social media. Let us know what you think about the show so far, and if there's any topics you'd like to see us address. We're going to be weaving in current events more, pop culture more. We're just here to be little philosophers on the regular. So thanks for witnessing and joining us. Thank you, Dr. Kiki. I love you. And we need a better outro, but I'll leave it at that.
Love you, and have a great rest of your day, y'all. Bye.